Hi, this is Brandy Shantz, and you're listening to Living Chronic. Today, I'm speaking with Amanda Chay, and she is the author of The Girlfriend's Guide to Lupus. This book was recently released just October of last year. So, an exciting new book and a very compelling personal story. So, welcome to the show.
Hi, Brandy. Thank you for having me.
So, how long ago were you diagnosed with lupus? Tell me about how that came about and, how you dealt with that.
All loaded questions. Well, I technically was diagnosed just like 3 years ago,
Mhm.
but I know I've had lupus for as long as I've had my oldest daughter, who also has lupus, and she's 23 years old.
Oh.
So I had a really, really tough pregnancy, really bad pregnancy. And the whole goal was simply first to get me to survive and then to, hopefully have this baby that was born. And so I think a lot of questions weren't brought up, like, why in the hell did this happen? And
Mhm.
if you see me fast forward, a decade, maybe some things start to happen, like I would end up with a lot of mouth ulcers. And I would ask like at the dentist, like, why do I keep getting these? And she'd be like, I don't know. Or another dentist would be like, I don't know, maybe you're stressed. And so we would think nothing of it. Like I lived in Florida and I was low in vitamin D, which is very ironic. And
Mhm.
I'd be like, why am I low in vitamin D? Or why is my white blood cell count low? And then I started getting a lot of joint pain. Now, I've been a beast, a really beast when it comes to being active and CrossFit and, all these college sports. And so I just thought, something I had done wrong.
Mhm.
But finally, I went to a doctor, right? And an orthopedic doctor. And I'm like, look, I would teach a boot camp and I would cry on the couch, just what you want from your instructor. And he just said, look, you're just not so young anymore. If you want, I'll run some blood tests. And that's when I found out I had Sjogren's, which is an autoimmune disease that typically attacks the moisture producing cells in the eyes and the mouth. And it gives you a whole bunch of other things, but that's kind of common. So that was it. But then it didn't really explain some things that continued to go on in my body. And that I actually had that diagnosis, I think, for almost 10 years before it was during COVID when I lost a lot of hair. It was very serious for me to lose a bunch of hair. And my rheumatologist at the time had usually been asking me every single time she saw me, are you losing hair? And I'd be like, no. Um, and when I told her that, she ran another test, and finally I ended up ANA positive, which is only, you don't have to have that. You can have a positive ANA and not have lupus, or a negative and also have lupus, but it is one of the 11 criteria that the American College of Rheumatology gives in a lupus diagnosis. So you need to have 4 out of the 11. But now I can look back and see that I probably had 8 out of 11, and we probably should have diagnosed me a long time ago.
Right.
Now, with lupus, it usually takes between 5 to 7 years with diagnosis. So I know I'm an anomaly there, but I think I just came out at a different spot. And then, as I'd mentioned, 5 months after I was diagnosed, my daughter was diagnosed as well. She'd gone through mono in college and she was very sick. And it was just such, so she's lucky to, in some way, to get a diagnosis at a young age because they could start her on medicine right away that would hopefully, you know, stop some of the disease that I continued to have for decades.
It's interesting. You mentioned a couple of things that were very similar to my experience. The first one being you're athletic, you're doing the CrossFit, you're doing all these things.
Hmm.
I was training for an Ironman. I was always running. I did all of these things. And I've learned it can be very difficult if you're an athlete to get a
Oh yeah,
diagnosis, especially as you get older, because it's, well, um, you're
you
getting
did all
old.
those miles. You beat them up. Yeah,
You can't be doing that now, or,
yeah.
well, you're still running. So
I
that
know.
sounds
Yeah,
good. For some reason, doctors can't take into account who you are and your current fitness
yeah.
level.
Your degradation of your fitness level. Yeah.
They
Well,
want to
you
wait.
still can work out.
That
Yeah,
must be good, right? And
yeah.
and the second thing you mentioned, the dentist.
Mm.
So one of the things I've learned over the years, and especially recently, all autoimmune diseases have various um, symptoms that can manifest in ways you never thought about
Yeah.
that the dentist can
Hmm.
find, the eye doctor. And sometimes I had to tell my eye doctor, hey, we need to focus on a couple of things here because I have Crohn's disease. I could have eye issues, and she had never heard of that. So I gave her some
Oh
hands
yeah.
information that I have, the
Mm-hmm.
Crohn's Colitis Foundation, and I got to teach my eye doctor, hey, you'll
Mm.
find it
That's
here too.
interesting because I have, for the over a year, I've had two frozen shoulders, not one, but two. And that, so I go through this thing called a hydrodissection, which has helped where they put a lot of water in it, expand it, and you get an increased range of motion. Anyway, the doctor was like, yeah, my patients with diabetes really, they have like this chronic inflammation. They don't really do well. Like it just seems to stick around for a long time. And I'm like, yeah, just like lupus that has chronic inflammation. And he was
Mhm.
like, ah, ah,
See,
yes, like, ah, that's why you have not one but two frozen shoulders and you're not healing. Yes, thank you.
you
Hmm.
got it
I
now,
get
guys. Thank you.
it.
I find it very fascinating. One, I know there's a lot doctors still don't know about autoimmune diseases. They're learning something new every single day. But
Sure.
also, I read over 80% of all Americans suffering from autoimmune conditions are women. And I've
Yes.
wondered,
Yes. Hmm.
how much does that
That's funny.
happen?
Okay, so I don't have the knowledge to give you. I will email it to you, but yesterday there was some breaking news about just that with women and some of the things they are figuring out with genes.
Mm,
So I'm not educated enough to speak about it, but I definitely relate to that. With lupus, there's 1.5 million Americans that have it, and 1.35 million are women. We have a 90% women rate there.
yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. I would love to
It
learn
is.
more. Why is it so many of us? Why are we getting this?
Yeah, yeah.
But
And there's, at least with lupus, there's still a lot of unknowns. We know there's a gene factor in there, but you need an environmental trigger.
mhm,
And everyone has a different type of trigger that brings it on, but it is, and then once you bring it on, you can't turn it off, right?
nope,
At the moment, that's what we're working towards. It's just a really tough thing. And there's just speculations like, is it this estrogen? Is it, some of these other things? And there's a lot of unknowns still. And that's a very long time. We've known about lupus over 100 years. It's a long time to not really
to
know.
still
But
not know.
I understand why though, because lupus is heterogeneous, meaning it's not just going to be like RA and really get some of these specific joints. It can affect every single thing in the entire body. And so when we try to study a disease that shows up like a snowflake uniquely for every individual, it's super challenging. But
Yeah.
I have heard the Lupus Foundation of America said that if we begin to solve the puzzle of lupus, we will have the puzzle for every single autoimmune disease out there.
And that's exactly what I was thinking. As soon as you said an
Yep.
environmental trigger, we've learned with Crohn's disease, it's the same. And that's why
Mm,
so many veterans like myself who serve near burn
mm,
pits have come home with Crohn's disease, which of course, when they first
yeah,
told me, they were nuts. I was
of
calm.
course.
Burning was going to kill my lungs. I was waiting for lung cancer.
Mm,
Crohn's disease.
mm.
But it's the same.
Fascinating, isn't it?
It really
Hmm.
is. And there's just so many similarities. We were talking about
Yeah.
Crohn's, it can affect my joints. Everything gets flared up, my eyes, my
Mm,
mouth, everything. And it's
mm.
with lupus. And I think it's really important for people to remember, when you've had this for a while, educate your doctors, go to the eye
Yes.
doctor, handle something, go to the dentist, say, hey, just so you know, I have lupus, I have Crohn's, something
Mm-hmm.
can affect me here. Um, and just to help people who are still waiting for that diagnosis because it does take so long. So, if you have those
Mm-hmm.
disorders or these weird joint pains that have no real pattern to them, maybe it's something else.
Yeah, that's why I wrote the Girlfriend's Guide to Lupus because one, when I was diagnosed, it was very lonely. I didn't know
Mhm.
anyone with lupus, and Googling online is both scary and overwhelming. So that was the first thing, and then the other thing is that a lot of people they couldn't understand. They would say to me, "Oh, Selena Gomez," and depending on how my relationship with them, sometimes I'd be like, "Mm-hmm." And sometimes I would be like, yes, and here, let me tell you why or how it's going to affect me.
Mhm.
I always educate my healthcare providers, but I have learned to be a very choosy chick when it comes to who I tell about my lupus.
Yes.
I know that from experience. The guy at the gym who, I remember him, he was like, "What's wrong with you? You look so different." Because I'd lost a lot of muscle. I'd been really sick. And I had told him, and he's like, "Well, you're strong. You can just get better." And, after you already know how the conversation goes. And I wanted to, drop kick him. But I also, in the end, realized that it was my issue for sharing with him. Like, I didn't need to share with him.
Yeah, that's interesting.
He wasn't worthy. He wasn't worthy of, now that I have lupus, I have sharpened my focus, who I allow in my life, what I watch, what I do. I've been, very choosy chick. So not everyone gets in. And sometimes people get in and I choose like, oh, that was a mistake. And that's okay with me. But I have heard this from other people who have been diagnosed with chronic disease. It's just like this horse blinders or the sharpening of women who will say like no more, like no,
Mhm.
you can't be in my life anymore, or I'm not going to put up with that.
I really love that perspective.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's fascinating. And why could we not as women done this before? And should we as women? Of course we should, but for whatever reason we didn't, but
yeah,
now we can.
I really love that perspective because it's interesting how when you do share with some people, they don't understand, they don't get it, and
Mhm.
some people educate them. They probably want to know more.
Yeah,
But there are others, they're not really interested. They're not bought into you and your struggles and what you're going through. And
yeah.
yeah, you're right. I don't need to tell you more.
No,
You're
I
just
mean, you've probably heard of the spoon theory, right?
oh yes, oh yes,
Yeah, so this, just for your listeners, spoon theory is like you have X amount of spoons throughout the day. And with someone who's healthy, maybe those spoons don't dwindle as much. You have a lot of spoons left at the end of the day. You can go out to the movies or party with friends. But when you have a chronic disease, and usually we talk about this in autoimmune disease world, when you get up and shower and go downstairs, oh my gosh, 2 spoons are done. So
yep,
when we have very limited spoons, we get a little stingy because we know that if we use up all of our spoons, before 5 o'clock, we're not going to have anything left. And if you give a spoon arguing with someone, trying to tell them, look at me, this is important, I feel sick, please give me your attention, in your own way, then you get mad and you're like, damn, my spoon's gone. Give me that
exactly.
back.
And I wanted that spoon to have dinner with my husband. Would
That's
have,
right. I wasted it on you.
yeah,
Man.
it's gone now.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a great perspective. I think it's very difficult to learn because you don't really know who is invested in you and your health and your friendship and your love until you are sick. And then it's
Yes.
amazing who stays in your life, who's meaningful in your life, and who is taking your spoons when you need them.
Yeah, I've had some quite big changes when it comes to who I allow in my support team now that have been like life altering, and albeit not easy in any manner. I know that I've had to put myself first, and it's my health that is what's driving what I need. So boundaries are hard for anyone,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I we don't like to tell many of these people a lot of these things if uncomfortable. We don't want to do it, but certainly for us when we have boundaries, when dealing with these autoimmune, I like to think of them, they're like this invisibility cloak.
Yeah,
They protect us against the choppy waters of life, and they are one of the best ways to keep ourselves healthy.
absolutely. And you talked about your support system. That support
Mm-hmm.
system is so critical to just live.
Oh yeah.
How do you construct that support system? Who comes
Mm.
in and how do you keep them healthy?
Mm-hmm. True. Yeah, that's a very important thing. I call it in the book, I call it create a support caucus.
I like
It sounds like a fancy word, caucus. A caucus is your choosing of your friends, your family members, the ones that you personally select. I envision in an ideal world, you get them all together, they come to your house, they all sit on the couch, you stand up and tell them what's going on with your diagnosis. You tell them how you're feeling, you tell them what you think the future may be, you let them ask you a bunch of questions, and then while you're hopefully feeling okay in the moment, you secure what you might need from them going forward, because it's much easier to ask for help when we're feeling somewhat decent than when we can barely use our finger to text, please pick up dog food for me.
yes.
So I think that's a nice thing. And also you can tell your support group what they can say on your behalf to someone else. What's wrong with Amanda? She doesn't look good. And, maybe they're like, yeah, she's going through some things and that's all they say. Or maybe they're okay with sharing like, yeah, she's got lupus and she's kind of battling the best she can.
That's great advice. And I like to focus too on the health. And of course, there's a difference, right, between your support system and your caregiver.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully
And
they're on the same team.
it better be.
I'm making any assumptions, but yeah, I really hope so.
Yeah, they
Yes.
got to be. And if they're not, you've got to reassess what's going on right now.
That's
Um,
right. Yep.
but keeping them healthy, I think, is very important as well.
Yeah, yeah. A caregiver is a two-way thing. Certainly, because we know, as you mentioned, most women are the ones dealing with these things. I was looking when I was writing the book. I didn't put it in, but it was really fascinating. I was trying to find some statistics that said when a woman gets an autoimmune disease, she is more likely or less likely to get a divorce. Now, some statistics show that when men are not healthy, oh, their marriage is just fine. But when women are unhealthy, marriages don't go as well, right? Uh,
Hmm.
but being a caregiver, whether if you're married to a man or a woman, regardless, if you're caring for someone and they're going through pain, it is hard to know exactly how to help them. I'm a big advocate of counseling. I'm a big advocate of talking through things. Again, listing things when you're not feeling bad. My husband and we created this system because I was tired of him asking me every day, how do you feel? Several times a day. And I'd be like, I feel like crap, thank you, everyday crap. So we came up with like a number scale. One is like, I am hunky dory. And 10 is like, you better take me to the ER now. And so it's easier, like on days where he knows I'm not great, I might be like, I'm a 5. And he's like, okay. Or I'm a 7. He's like, okay, what do you need from me today? I'm like, all right, I need you to do dinner. I can't do it. And he's like, okay.
That's
So that
great.
was just an easier way for me to go through that support. But, I always encourage honesty. I encourage
Mhm.
creating those boundaries, and that often takes a lot of time for self reflection and self awareness. And despite what we think that we are so aware, statistics show us like 80% of us are not so great at it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
Where's
difficult.
this 80-20 rule goes for everything in life?
Everything.
80-20.
Well,
What's
it
that
really
80-20?
does seem that way, doesn't it? And, it's
Yeah.
you brought up statistics about divorce because there's a lot out there, as these things tend to be. It's a little fuzzy, There's so many
Mm,
people who still haven't been diagnosed and are going through it or are trying
mm,
to get a diagnosis or, the
yeah.
before. There's just not a whole lot of focus on women in autoimmune diseases. How are they coping? But I've seen numbers as high as over
Mm,
50% of people who get diagnosed with an autoimmune disease end up divorced.
yeah. Well,
And
it's
which
it's not surprising, right? The woman is often statistically the caregiver, does a
right.
lot more, and when she can't do it and the other person has to do it, and then she feels upset or she feels like, "Hey, I have done my stuff for you all the time. Why aren't you here to help me
Yep.
as well?" It's eye-opening and it's a slap, and some people are like, "Hell, I'll just go take care of myself on my own. At least I won't be mad that no one's there to help me."
You're
I
right. And
get it.
the other problem is uh, there was almost no support for me when I was first diagnosed. I mean, they give you
Mm,
nothing. The story I always tell,
mm-hmm.
I couldn't get to work. My doctor said, well, I don't know, just apply for disability. And that's
Oh, okay. Got
where
it.
are we? So I had to
Yeah.
really seek out people who could help me and, uh,
Mhm.
give me good advice. It's
Mhm.
almost non-existent. My husband didn't even get a word,
Mm.
nothing. It was just,
Mm.
hey, honey, I have Crohn's disease. Well, what does this mean? I don't know. Looks like
Mm.
a name for it, though. I have a treatment
Yeah,
plan.
yeah.
It's going to work yet. We're trying.
Yeah.
And there's just so much that could be learned.
Mhm.
If we just shared these things and put something together. Can't we get a starter pack?
Yeah, really. Yeah,
No,
amen. Yeah.
here you go. You're a
Yeah.
caregiver. Your wife now has an autoimmune disease. Here you go. Run with it.
Yes.
Um,
That's why I have 2 chapters in the book about how to, one of them I'm like, pass this book over to your care team, your supporter, and I'm like, say this. Do not say this.
yeah,
Do this. Don't do that because I I looked at my husband and I took notes.
And
So,
it's
there's
so
just some
important.
guidance.
There's
Yeah.
so little out there. There is a book, trying to remember the title of it, but it's a book about Lyme disease, chronic Lyme disease, and he wrote it from a caregiver's perspective because his wife had it.
Mm,
He wanted to,
how nice.
how do I care for her now?
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, why is there not more out there from that perspective to say, here you go, give some good suggestions. We need your system. Give it a
Yeah.
number. That's
Yeah.
important to learn right up front instead of figuring that out 3 years later, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So uh, caregivers, I don't know how we live without them. Um, so what's your advice for somebody who has just been diagnosed with lupus or another autoimmune disease, chronic illness?
I would say arm yourself with self-compassion, some
Mm,
compassion for yourself. You're going through a lot. It's going to be, uncertain road ahead for quite some time. So hope you like some hills and some twists and turns.
mm,
I would say arm yourself with education. You can never go wrong. Um, Read books, listen to videos, research science, the articles behind it, see who they're actually studying, how many people, some of the specifics of that. And then I would encourage people to see if they can find one friend of whatever disease they have. Life is much easier when you have one friend, just one. So I had none at the beginning. Now I have several, but I have two really good ones. My daughter, of course, is a great one. And then I have a great one in Tina. And oftentimes you just text like, you know, feel like shit. And you're like, okay, like someone gets you. And so that makes life much easier. And then the last thing I would say is to really amp up, I mentioned it before, self-awareness, like be so curious about what's going on with your body. If you think it doesn't relate to whatever your condition is, doesn't matter. Still take note. I took a year of just documenting everything on this app. I mean, everything,
yes.
TMI of stuff that you're like, oh,
Yes. No.
but you learn everything. Sometimes they get fancy, it gives you the data behind it, but you begin to be curious of what's going on with you. Wow, I didn't sleep well last night. Maybe my brain is really fuzzy today because of this. Or, ooh, I don't think I drank a lot of water yesterday. Maybe that's why it's so hard to poop today. These things come together and they all pertain to you. And it's really essential that you keep an eye on those.
You're right. And you know what? We talked about over 80% women. We do sometimes have difficulty advocating for ourselves. Sometimes we don't want to be selfish. We always
Mm,
want to help others.
mm-hmm,
Well, don't worry about me. But I
mm-hmm.
sometimes have a difficult time getting a doctor to listen to us. And if you have
Oh, yeah.
everything you've gone through and you can show that doctor, you know, I can't do the triathlons anymore. I still haven't gotten my body where I can. But my husband got me a brand new, very expensive Garmin watch. And that was important. And the reason why this thing documents everything: how I've
Mm,
slept, how I feel, my heart rate, what it did, my breathing, you name it. It's in here. This thing even gives me an EKG. Um,
all right.
so when I go into the doctor, I download. This is what's been going
Mm-hmm.
on for the last 3 months. You can clearly see that this, and this is significant.
Yeah.
Documentation helps. Don't let them
Yeah,
guess.
absolutely.
Let them tell you it's
Yeah,
not. You show it to them.
that's right. I spent last Thursday, I was in the ER because I was hit by a car. And the nurses were very kind. They let me sit in the back for like 5 hours. I don't know why. They didn't make me sit in the waiting room eventually, and they just made me sit. So I had the pleasure of listening to so many people talk. And I learned that people don't usually tell their doctors everything. The
Oh,
doctors have to pull it out of them. One gentleman started, since I don't know, I didn't see his face. He won't mind me saying this, but he was like, yeah, 50 years ago, I had gangrene. I brought the report from you. I was in the Marines. And I think he had something like wrong with his eye. And I thought, holy cow, it's like bearing the lead. So this is where we have to be our own best advocates. We need to not hide this stuff down. We need to go in armed with, here's what I want to address with my doctor today. Here's what my concerns are. Here's what I want to know what their opinion is on that. And take it all on, because there will be no one that will best advocate for you than you. Your
yep.
people may love you. They may do everything in their world possible, but honestly, they don't know what you go through. all throughout the day. Only you are the ones who can speak up to this measure. And while you still have a voice, use it.
Absolutely. That's the best way to get through. And,
Yep.
another good piece of advice I've learned over the last year, if you want to go on there, use some AI, go on there and say, what questions do I need to ask my doctor if this is what I'm feeling and I have lupus? And it will
Yeah.
spit out some darn good questions.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I keep a notes app and a note on my app, and I just literally, whenever there's anything up, I just make a note because I'll forget about it or we'll talk about something else. If there's studies that came out, I'll copy that study and put it down as well. I saw this. What do you think of it?
I've brought journal articles into the doctor's office with me.
Oh yeah.
Here it is. Found
Yeah.
this.
Sound like to me. Mm-hmm.
So important, though. We didn't do that in the beginning. I know that's for certain.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay. You take this. I'm like, okay, I will. Now I'm
I
like, nope.
Not today, doc. We'll talk
Yep.
about this first. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard. It's very difficult, especially as women.
Yeah.
It's really difficult. And I'm so happy that there are people like you out there um, sharing that advice and writing a good book to help other people going through this because we really need it. It's a learned behavior. Sometimes I feel like my 10 years with Crohn's disease should be on my resume.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the interesting thing is I really wanted women to know that I, of course, have lupus, and I know some of the things that help me. Big focus of the book is not on, hey, you've got this crappy disease, but the other part is you've got part of your health that you still have control, and how do you control that? But I wanted women to know that I know, I know the science, I know what I should be doing, and sometimes I still don't do it. I forget, I screw up, I fall down, I make poor choices, but that's not who I am. It's just me as a, fallible human being just having a real experience. So I
Absolutely.
pick myself up and I'm like, whoops. And then I try to do better next time.
That's great advice. That's a great point to end on because you know what? If all you had today was 40% and you gave 40%, you did 100.
That's
If
right.
if you didn't even quite make it there, that's fine.
That's fine.
Start again
Yeah.
tomorrow.
When you were healthy, you still didn't get it all done anyway. So
No, we
why are we,
didn't.
yeah, let's be truthful. Yeah. It just doesn't happen.
No,
So
we
it's
didn't.
okay.
We weren't as
Give
fabulous
yourself the grace.
as we were.
I know. I know.
It's fine.
It
Love that.
is.
Give yourself the grace. Don't be so hard on yourself.
Mm,
Tomorrow is another day. Move on.
get back in there. That's right. That's right.
Well, thank you for being here. Everyone, please go out, get the Girlfriend's Guide to Lupus. These are some great points, so many learning points. And it's so important for us to all help each other out, reach out, give another woman a hand up to help them out. So, again, thank you for being here, Amanda. I'll be sure to put your book on my website as well. Living Chronic. What an amazing person you are. Thank you so much for your contributions.
Thank you, Brandy. Appreciate your time.